Jon Perry from the Stated Clearly website and YouTube channel created a video that examines the evidence for evolution. I assume from his other videos that he's referring to Darwinian evolution, and as you will see, Perry either ignores or doesn't understand the main arguments against evolution in his video.
The theory of biological evolution makes two very bold claims about living creatures. First, all living things on Earth are related. They evolved from a common ancestor. Second, the evolution of living things is powered by natural processes. To keep things simple, here we'll focus on evolution's first claim that all living things on Earth are related.
Perry begins by saying that he is going to focus on the assertion that all things are related. Although some skeptics of Darwinism have proposed reasons to doubt this conclusion, it is by no means the most serious objection to evolution. And many skeptics of Darwinism are willing to concede that all living things are related. The real concern for many scientists is that the mechanism of natural selection acting on random mutation may be inadequate to produce new genetic information in the amazing diversity of life we see on our planet. Perry then goes on in his video to produce evidence for evolution from embryology, as we will see.
Embryology is the study of how creatures develop before being born or hatching from an egg. Here we see a dolphin and a human embryo side by side at similar stages of development. Notice that they both have what look like arm buds and leg buds. In humans, the leg buds grow to become legs. In whales, they grow for a while but then stop, effectively fading away as the rest of the whale continues to grow.
It has been pointed out that the information about evolution that can be gained from embryology is quite limited. It was first popularized by Ernst Haeckel, and it has been widely known for decades that Haeckel's evidence for evolution consisted of cherry-picked data and fraudulent drawings of embryo development. Here we see an example of Haeckel's drawings of embryos. Here we see some of Haeckel's drawings of embryos compared to actual photographs of the developing embryos at the same stages of development. Since Perry only gives us two photographs of human and dolphin embryos to compare, it is impossible to know whether or not he is simply cherry-picking his data to make his case for evolution like Haeckel did. Next, Perry moves on to the fossil record to make his case for whale evolution. From these two slides, it is important to note the dates for the various fossils he uses to make his case. Perry believes that basilosaurids date back to about 34 to 40 million years ago, and that Myocetus fossils date back to about 47.5 million years ago. So by Perry's own admission, whale evolution took from between 13.5 to 7.5 million years to occur. Next, Perry brings in evidence from DNA comparison to make his case for evolution. This is the weakest argument he has in his entire video.
Whale DNA has been compared to all kinds of other animals, fish, sea lions, you name it. And so far, the closest genetic match is to the pudgy, water-loving hippopotamus. This does not mean that whales evolved from hippos, but if this genetic finding is correct, whales and hippos both evolved from a common ancestor that lived roughly 54 million years ago.
I guess Perry failed to notice that none of the walking whale fossils he presented as evidence for whale evolution bear any resemblance to modern hippos. The science of DNA comparison is very new and fraught with problems, and in cases like this where it delivers a result that is counterintuitive, I think it should just be ignored.
So to sum things up, thousands of observable facts from completely independent fields of study have come together to tell us the exact same story. All living things on Earth are related.
So Perry thinks that by showing evidence for common descent, he has shown that evolution is true, while ignoring the problems of how Darwinism doesn't actually explain the creation of new genetic information. Perry's grasp of evolution and the arguments against it seems pretty inadequate. So when in his Stated Clearly blog, Perry tries to show how evolutionary biologist Richard Sternberg is wrong in a speech Sternberg made about whale evolution and population genetics, Perry again fails miserably. Here is some clips from an Illustra Media video where Sternberg is making the same arguments that Perry tries to refute in his blog article attacking Sternberg.
The scale of these adaptations would have to be massive, including a remodel of the skull and muscles to move the nostrils to the top of the head, the conversion of front legs into flippers, a reconstruction of the skeleton, including a ball joint that allowed the tail to move up and down, the transformation of a few dozen teeth into hundreds of plates lined with brush-like fibers, the reorganization of kidney tissues to accommodate the intake of salt water, lungs dramatically enlarged and renovated to withstand the intense pressure of deep dives, the inclusion of a blubber layer for insulation in cold water, and modifications of ears, eyes, and skin to work effectively in an aquatic environment.
Just think of all the parameters that would have to be modified, and then multiply that by, I don't know, 1,000-fold or more than that. That's the scale of the problem that you're dealing with.
In his blog, Perry says, several years back, Richard Sternberg made a speech that has become popular among the anti-evo community. In it, he claims that 8 million years isn't enough time for that transition to have taken place because there are too many changes that occur between the two groups. In his speech, he lists 15 changes. What Perry fails to understand is that the point of Sternberg's lecture wasn't to point out 15 changes required to turn a land mammal into a whale, but was rather to use information from a population genetics paper written by two critics of intelligent design to show that 10 million years wasn't enough time for whale evolution to occur, since it would take over 100 million years for two coordinated mutations to occur in an evolving whale population. In his blog, Perry begins by saying that Sternberg gets his science wrong when describing the complexity of the whale countercurrent heat exchange system. Perry thinks that since all mammals have some sort of heat exchange system, that is all that is needed for male whales to keep their sperm at a viable temperature. This couldn't be further from the truth.
In the context of Darwinian evolution, the most crucial adaptations would involve the male reproductive system. To optimize the whale's mobility in water, its reproductive organs would have to move from the exterior of the animal's torso to inside its abdominal cavity. But to produce sperm, the internalized testes must be cooled and kept below core body temperature.
Unless it's kept below, you'd have no sperm production, period. And in evolutionary terms, sterility means it's no-go. You don't count in the race of life, so to speak.
As a male humpback swims, it generates heat, raising its body temperature. To prevent sterility, the whale relies on a refrigeration mechanism designed into its circulatory system. In the non-insulated regions of the dorsal fin and tail, blood is cooled and then transported through a network of veins to the whale's abdomen. Here, beneath a layer of muscles, a web of veins and arteries surround the testes. They are arranged so blood flows in alternate directions, and heat from the warm arteries radiates to the cooler veins. This transfer lowers the temperature of the blood to a safe level before it is channeled to the reproductive organs.
So the cooling system makes sense because you have internalized reproductive glands. The internalized reproductive glands, however, are a no-go unless you've got the cooling system. You can't explain the emergence of one without the other.
In his lecture, Sternberg mentions the many problems that Darwinian evolution would have to solve in order to create a fully aquatic whale. But he then goes on to say that each of these changes would require hundreds, if not thousands, of genetic mutations. In the rest of the lecture, Sternberg addresses the problem of population genetics and how there simply isn't enough time in the geologic record for whales to evolve even one complex new trait, let alone the hundreds or thousands of new traits required. Perry's blog response to this lecture shows almost no understanding of Sternberg's claim that population genetics shows that evolutionary history clearly shows that there simply wasn't enough time for whale evolution to occur.
In 2008, researchers at Cornell University calculated the time required to generate randomly a single pair of cooperative mutations in a population of large mammals. Richard Sternberg applied these calculations to his ongoing analysis.
And they came to the conclusion that, sure, you can get these two coordinated mutations, but it is a problem. It's a problem because you need, as far as we know, on the order of well over 100 million years to give you the coordinated mutations that would, just two, that would give you some beneficial modification. And by my reckoning, to account for the transformation that you'd see, you need far more than two mutations.
According to the most generous interpretations of the fossil record, the longest possible time frame for the theorized evolution of a land-dwelling animal into a whale is 9 million years.
This 10 million year figure is comparable to Perry's own figure of 7.5 to 13.5 million years for whale evolution.
That's a fraction of the 100 million years required to produce a single pair of cooperative mutations, and just one of the countless anatomical changes necessary for natural selection to succeed.
So when you just plug in the math in their various ways, I mean, what you've done is you've exceeded the time that the geological record provides you with. And then you start saying, okay, now I'm going to rely on these coordinated changes, and it's kind of game over.
It seems clear that Perry has a basic understanding of the science behind Darwinian evolution, but it is also clear that he fails to understand the serious arguments that are made by those skeptical of Darwinism, and therefore cannot ultimately defend the premise that evolution appears to be true.